All right, number 10. Final one. I hope you stayed for this one because a lot of Swedish people didn't know this, but...
Okay, look how many toothpaste flavors they have. So hello, if you're new-
I can't believe, wait, do I look the same? 7 months ago, I made this video. I made this video 7 months ago. Okay, so long story short, let me explain. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Chloe Minas. I played professional football in Sweden. My first ever professional contract I signed with Växjö DFF this year. I moved to Sweden around January 6th, 2025. And then I lived there for around, I guess, 8 months, and then I moved back to Canada. So originally I am Canadian. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Grew up playing soccer, football. I don't know what to say now. Soccer or football? In Canada we say soccer, okay? I grew up playing soccer. I went to the States as well. I went to the University of Pittsburgh to play soccer for 5 years there. And that was an amazing experience. And then I signed my first professional contract to go play in the Damallsvenskan, which is the top league in Sweden. And I played there for around 8 months. Now, I moved back to Montreal and I am playing for a new team called the Montreal Roses. So Canada has had their first ever professional league debut this year. It's in its inaugural season and I get to be a part of that. So I'm playing for the Montreal Roses. I'm number 15, I'm a midfielder. My whole channel has been based off of behind the scenes of football, behind the scenes of my experience in Sweden, and now since I moved back to Montreal, I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the reverse culture shocks that I experienced coming back home from Montreal after living abroad for so long. So I did move out of the house when I was 17 years old, so I'm 23 right now. So it's been a while since I've actually lived in Canada for more than a couple weeks, to be honest. Every time I go back to Canada, I visit for a couple of weeks and then I go back to wherever I was. But now my home is Montreal. So a bit of a difference, by the way. I lived in Växjö, Sweden. A little bit of a background about Växjö. I think the population of Växjö is like close to 100,000, I would say. And the population, wait, let me look this up. Okay, it's around 4 million people in Montreal. 100,000 people compared to 4 million people. I thought I knew what to expect coming home, back to Canada, back to Montreal, but there are so many little things that completely shocked me. Canada feels so different now compared to when I was growing up because I've been to so many different places and I've lived in different places as well. So today I'm gonna be sharing the 10 biggest things I honestly forgot about and things that shocked me about moving back to Canada from Sweden. So I didn't really see them coming, but anyways, you'll see. Okay, let's get started. Woo! Wait, it's like before we get started, I just want to say that obviously the population is different in Växjö and in Montreal. So this won't be like a big generalization of Sweden since I've only lived in a small part of Sweden and I've traveled to other places in Sweden, but this is gonna be kind of like the biggest things that I noticed right away from moving back to Montreal. So let's do it. Okay, starting with number 1. So in Canada, taxes are not included in the final price. So let's say I'm going to buy a TV for $100. I will actually end up paying $115 or however much the percentage of the taxes when I get to the cashier. In Sweden, and a lot of places in Europe as well, it's included in the price. So if I'm getting a TV for 1,000 kroner, it's gonna be 1,000 kroner, okay? So that's something I forgot. I didn't realize how nice it was to have taxes included in the price. Like in Canada, you need like a calculator before you check out just to double check how much you're gonna end up paying that day. But no, honestly, in Sweden, it feels so much straightforward. I kind of miss the simplicity, but hey, everything has its pros and its cons. Okay, number 2, I'm gonna say the pastries. So I thought Canada had some good pastries. I put Tim Hortons on top there, okay? But that was before I went to Sweden. For my Canadian viewers, in Sweden there's something called fika, which is basically a culture where you get a pastry. It doesn't have to be a pastry, but it's kind of like grab a coffee, grab a pastry, grab a friend, and enjoy it. You know, like hang out with someone or hang out by yourself. Fika is a culture, okay? So there's fika in Sweden. Anyways, so the fika pastries, for example, Oh my gosh, do I miss them. Kanelbullar, chokladbullar. So cinnamon buns, chocolate balls, there's cardamom buns. I also liked princess torta. Honestly, something I miss a lot is when it's your birthday in Sweden, you bring pastries to people. I guess in Canada and other places, if it's my birthday, people bring me a cake and everyone sings. But in Sweden, you bring your cake to people. So anyways, all this to say that Tim Hortons does not compare to the Swedish fika. Not gonna lie, I'm sorry. If I can compare a Tim Hortons donut and like a donut at a Swedish pastry shop, 100% I'm putting the Swedish bakery all day over Tim Hortons donuts. I'm sorry. There's something about the freshness, there's something about the quality of the pastry, and I'm not someone that eats a lot of sweets, but I'm someone that loves to indulge in a good quality sweet treat. I feel like it's kind of weird if I go to Tim Hortons right now and get a donut because it won't be as good of quality as all the pastries were in Sweden. Anyways, long story short, Swedish pastries taste fresher. Like, they're not super sweet. That's what I feel like I noticed. I feel like here, the pastries are sweeter. Sometimes the pastries taste like they've been sitting out for a week. If I could teleport one thing back from Sweden to Canada, other than my friends, it would be fika. Miss you guys, I love you. I love you. All right, number three. By the way, if there's an echo in here, it's because there's no furniture. Sorry about the audio if it's not that great. Anyways, number three. Tim Hortons, by the way, for my Swedish viewers, is kind of similar to Espresso House, but Canadian version, I'd say. This one shocked me because I completely forgot about it, okay? Every time you go to pay in Canada, the cashier always asks credit or debit. In Sweden, you just tap and you leave. And then they ask if you want the receipt and then you leave. Kvitto, nej tack. But you tap and leave. I remember getting something at the pharmacy. I was about to pay and he's like, okay, cash or card? And I was like, oh, card. Like, I forget that cash exists because I did not use a single piece of cash in Sweden. To be honest, I think the one time I saw what cash looked like in Sweden was at a museum. Wait, let me show you.
Look at this nice fika.
So fun fact, I think from my experience so far, I haven't seen a lot of people use cash or coins. So this is the first time I'm actually seeing Swedish krona. Yeah, I haven't seen people use cash, so I don't even know what a krona looks like. And I've been using my cards, so. I go get my thing at the pharmacy and then they're like, okay, credit or debit? And obviously they said this in French. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know which one. I never realized how smooth it was in Sweden until I came back. Not saying that this is like a big deal, but it's just something that I forgot about, that before you pay, you answer credit or debit. If anyone's wondering, I said credit. Okay. Numéro 4. In Sweden, we use kilograms, and in Canada, we use pounds. So my brain for the last 8 months or so has been wired to kilograms. And now Canada's got me confused. No, it's not that bad. But I do remember, wait, I have a funny story. I do remember in Sweden, I had a hard time adjusting to the kilogram system. So there was one time in the gym where I accidentally lifted 300 pounds, which is 150 kilos, by the way, when I did not think that was the exact conversion. So like, for example, so we were doing like a squat or like a half squat or something, and then the girls on my team were like, okay, this is 150 kilos. I was like, all right. In my head, I didn't make the conversion quick enough. I was like, 150 kilos, that must be like 160 pounds or something. Like, being stupid, like I didn't make the conversion quick enough. Anyways, I ended up being fine, of course, but when I lifted, I was like, what is going on? Like, how weak am I? Or how heavy is this bar? I really almost hurt myself, so please be careful. Be careful. I definitely failed that rep. Not gonna lie, not gonna lie. Number 5. I should have started this earlier with this one, but Montreal is very, very big with the French language compared to, I'm not gonna say just Montreal, but Quebec. The province of Quebec is very, very French. Fair enough. I love it. I love the French here. Compared to Canada, there's more French in Quebec than there is in the rest of Canada. One of my first shocks was how much people speak French here. I forgot how bilingual this city is in terms of French and English, but the default, I would say, is more French than English. So of course I grew up speaking French here, so I am fluent in French. I think the thing that's cool about Montreal specifically is how much we switch from French and English. I know there's, what is it, Sweglish? Svinglish? Wait, Fangelska? How do you say it? Swinglish. I think, yeah, Swinglish. There's Swinglish, but I feel like in Montreal, there's way more French and English combined in sentences. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm born here and I have more exposure with that, because in Sweden, obviously I didn't speak Swedish as well or great, so I didn't have the opportunity to switch from English into Swedish. As soon as you hear like someone, let's say if I go in public and I start speaking French, and then if I say one word in English, the conversation might just switch all in English now. So it's super fluid. In Sweden, people also switch to English, but here in Montreal, it feels like super fast, like a constant back and forth, like dance between both languages, I guess. And the thing about Montreal, yes, it is French speaking, but it's everything speaking. There is every single language in the world here. Not saying I didn't hear every single language in Sweden. Obviously, I lived in a smaller town. I bet in Stockholm I would hear more languages, but it is super, super, extremely diverse in Montreal, and I love it. This one actually shocked me a bit more because I never really saw stuff like this in Sweden. But just yesterday, for example, my dad's car got hit in a hit and run. So my dad's car was parked outside of our house and someone just smashed into the car behind it, and the car behind it smashed into my dad's car, and like my dad's car is wrecked now. I would show you pictures, but I want to keep the privacy of my dad's car. But I feel like in Sweden, I didn't really see stuff like that. Obviously, I felt way more safer in Sweden. Then, like for example, on the highway a couple weeks ago here in Montreal, I saw like a car on fire. I felt like I was in a movie scene. Everyone ended up being okay, but it was in actual flames. In Sweden, of course, crime exists, but it feels way more hidden if I'm looking at it relatively to Montreal specifically. I haven't lived in other places in Canada, but day-to-day life in Sweden felt more safe, more calm. And I feel like in Montreal, obviously you hear sirens left and right. And I remember when my mom visited Sweden, she was wondering like what the sirens of ambulances and police cars sounded like, because we barely heard any of them. I've been back 3 weeks and I've already seen like more chaos in the city compared to when I was living in Sweden. But I'm not saying that Canada's super dangerous. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying, compared to Sweden, I think there's a bit more differences. It's still a safe place, but compared to Sweden, I think Sweden's safer. I think in Montreal specifically, there is a bit more loudness, I'd say. Basically, Montreal's super loud. There's always something going on. There's cars everywhere. I obviously didn't live in a big city like Stockholm, like I said. I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm not comparing apples to apples. I know it's a bit different. But I remember, like, I've obviously visited Stockholm, and I think the driving was way calmer than the driving here in Montreal. I think it was obviously touristy. Stockholm was touristy, but I do think Montreal is very loud compared to a culture like the Swedish culture, because I did think that Swedish culture was a bit more reserved. Not in a bad way, I just think people open up more when you get to know them a bit better. Maybe Montreal is a bit louder than the small Swedish town I was living in. Duh! I'm gonna say I miss the Swedish grocery stores. Here, grocery stores, they're bigger. There's a lot of like processed snacks, like, oh my gosh. My dad got granola bars the other day. The ingredient list is crazy long, and I think it was more of a fun experience in Sweden, honestly. Going to Ica, even though it's like bigger, produce was a bit more fresh maybe. It felt like, obviously the bread is way more fresh at Ica compared to the Maxi I go here. It's just different. It's just different. But like the cereal aisle over here is crazy big compared to the cereal aisle in Ica Maxi. Yeah, there's no candy walls over here. I think it's fun seeing the little trade-offs at each place. Like maybe in Canada we have a bunch of cereal and the trade-off is that in Sweden you have a bunch of candy. So hey, you win some and you lose some. I know this is a German company, but I miss Lidl. You know how much I felt about Lidl. I love Lidl. All right, number 9, I'm gonna say public transport. I thought it was way better in Sweden. I think in Sweden you can take the train anywhere and it's not that expensive. It's pretty time efficient. Here, like, we have public transport, of course. Like Montreal is a very, very public transporty city. But like, there are some places where I'd say it's obviously better to, you know, take a car to instead of the metro or the bus. We have a metro here. We didn't have one in Växjö. Obviously there's some in Stockholm and in the bigger cities. If you miss the bus in some Canadian cities, you might as well just walk to your destination because it takes a while. It depends on the city in Canada. Toronto, great. I think Montreal is good. The bigger cities obviously have better transportation. In Växjö, I could buy a bus ticket on my phone and not even have a bus pass. In Montreal, I can't even buy like a ticket on my phone without a bus pass. So I had to buy a bus pass, like a physical plastic thing for $6. And then I could load tickets on it through my phone, but like, it's so complicated. I like how in Sweden there wasn't as much of a hassle. Also forgot to mention this, but in Canada, people sit next to each other on the bus. In Sweden, people didn't. All right, number 10. Final one. I hope you stayed for this one because a lot of Swedish people didn't know this, but I forgot that in Canada we have our milk in bags. You can buy milk in bags, like literal plastic bags. I remember seeing this at the grocery store. I don't think my family does this per se, but a lot of Canadian families do this. In Sweden, it's all in cartons or bottles, straightforward. But coming back and seeing milk bags at grocery stores, I was like, okay, I forget we do this. You cut the corner and hope that it doesn't spill out. And there's like a little thing you buy, like a jug, a plastic jug, and then you put a plastic bag in the plastic jug. A lot of plastic. I think the Swedish people will lose their minds. Also, so, like, I miss, this is like a side note, the recycling and all that. The culture behind waste was way more efficient in Sweden compared to Canada. Obviously in Canada, we compost, we recycle, we do all these things, but I don't think the system is as efficient in Canada as it was in Sweden. I mean, hey, milk in a bag is not bad per se, but it's just one of the weird things we do in Canada. And you don't notice until you've been away. All right, so those are the 10 biggest, I guess, culture shocks that I could think of that hit me right away from moving back to Canada from Sweden. I didn't expect some of these culture shocks to hit me this hard, but hey, here we are. If you're Swedish, let me know in the comments like what surprised you the most about Canada, because I'm kind of interested to hear if any of these are strange to you and what do you think would shock you the most if you visited here. And if you're Canadian, let me know if I nailed it or if I'm being dramatic. Like if you're Canadian watching this, you're gonna be like, oh, this is all normal. But it's only until you live somewhere else that you notice that sometimes it's different other places. All right, and a message to my future kids, I will say, is that try to pay attention. When I moved back to Canada after living in Sweden, I noticed everything. The little differences, the shocks, the funny stuff, and I think that's the point of life. Pay attention. Notice the details because they'll teach you things about yourself and about the world. And also, while you're at it, don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to move across the country. Don't be afraid to do something scary because, like I mentioned in my last videos, every time you throw yourself into something new, you grow. Whether it's like a new job, a new place, new country, new team, do it. Lean into it. It's always worth it. It's always worth it. Mark my words, everything happens for a reason. But anyways, thank you so much for following along, and I'll see everybody in the next video. Au revoir!